After my wife's death, I stopped answering messages. Not out of anger or sadness, but out of emptiness. A void that absorbed me, that never filled. In the days following the burial, I barely spoke. My lips had sealed as if they had forgotten their function. I ate just enough mechanically, without distinguishing flavors. I slept because my body surrendered, not because I sought rest. The world had lost its color, its purpose. Each morning was an unnecessary effort. When I opened the closet and found my ski equipment covered by a thin layer of dust, something inside me activated. I touched it with reverence, as if it were a sacred artifact. I knew I needed to disappear, not toward the past, where memories would destroy me, nor toward the future, which now looked like an endless desert. Only to the ice, where absolute white could perhaps erase everything. I loaded what was necessary into my car: the red and black thermal suit, reinforced boots, professional gloves, backpack with supplies for a week, silver survival blanket, compass that had belonged to my father. I looked at it for a moment, wondering if it would guide me to somewhere that mattered. No weapons. I didn't expect to find danger out there, nor salvation either. Just silence and perhaps, if I was lucky, temporary oblivion. I drove without a map, without clear direction. The radio off, windows slightly open, letting the cutting cold enter. I crossed secondary roads covered in snow, sleepy towns where lights went out early, abandoned service stations with rusted signs. The snow fell constant, hypnotic. Finally, the world became completely white, flat white, infinite white. The roads ceased to exist. I parked the car near a rusted metal shed, a structure that once served to monitor the weather, now covered by layers of frost. The door hinges creaked when I got out, as if nothing human had passed through there in years. I didn't think. I hadn't come here to think. I just put on my skis, pulled the zipper of my coat up to my neck, secured the backpack straps, and started moving forward. The first push was clumsy, like a newborn trying to walk. The second, more confident. By the third, my body remembered the rhythm. The sky was an impenetrable gray ceiling. The light, opaque and diffuse, erased all shadows. The world seemed still, suspended in time. I breathed with effort, forming dense clouds in front of my face, but without complaint. My nose went numb first, then my cheeks. It didn't matter. It was the first time in months that I felt something resembling a reason, even if that reason was simply to advance until I couldn't anymore. After an hour of skiing, my muscles burned satisfyingly. The sweat beneath the thermal suit contrasted with the outside cold. It was then when I saw her. In the distance, a vertical figure broke the monotony of the white horizon. Motionless, thin, like a needle stuck in the snow. It didn't match any animal I knew. It didn't look like another hiker. No weather signal would appear so far from everything. I considered changing direction, but curiosity, or perhaps desperation for something different, pushed me toward it. I approached slowly, fearing it was a hallucination from the cold. The figure didn't move, didn't shout, didn't flee. It remained static, as if waiting for me. When I was just a few meters away, I understood. It wasn't human. She stood on a thin crack that divided the ice like an ancient scar. Tall, slender, with blue skin covered by intricate curved patterns that gleamed with silver reflections when the light changed. Her face had feminine features, but at the same time alien, with stylized lines that formed spirals across her forehead and cheeks. Her long braided hair fell over clothing, made of fur, that contrasted with her blue skin. Unlike what I had imagined, she wasn't naked, but wore a fur coat that covered her shoulders and fell like a primitive dress tied at the waist with a cord. Her visible arms and legs showed the same blue skin, decorated with those fluid, almost tribal patterns. Her feet ended in a strange form, as if adapted for walking on ice. She didn't seem to feel cold. She didn't even seem to breathe. Her chest barely moved. Her eyes were deeply human, and at the same time completely foreign, with a brightness that reminded me of deep waters beneath polar ice. They watched without blinking, with an attention that chilled more than the air. I felt I was being evaluated, catalogued, like an insect under a microscope. I stopped. A primitive fear took hold of me. It wasn't terror, but something more ancient. The sensation of being in front of something that shouldn't exist, but had always been there. She took a step backward. The ice didn't crack under her weight. We didn't speak. How could we? Words seemed useless, ridiculous. A thick silence enveloped us, denser than snow, colder than wind. She turned with a fluid movement, as if she had no bones but liquid currents beneath her skin. She walked toward a crevice in the ice that I hadn't noticed before. She stopped at the edge. She looked at me once more. Without invitation, without rejection. Then she descended gracefully, melding with the crack. Without knowing why, I followed her. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was instinct, or perhaps surrender. We descended down a gentle slope that gradually narrowed, like a natural funnel. The light diminished, but never completely disappeared. Reflected 1,000 times on the ice walls, it created a bluish glow that allowed me to see. The passage led to a natural chamber. The ceiling was high, covered with thin stalactites that dripped slowly, forming pillars in a process that would take millennia to complete. The floor was slippery, but firm. In the center, something that defied all logic. A fire built with reddish minerals that emitted a faint heat, like a constant ember, without being consumed. The red light mixed with the blue of the ice, creating purple tones on the walls. There were animal skins I didn't recognize, fish bones organized in a pattern that suggested purpose, an improvised bed with dry moss that shouldn't exist in this climate. She inhabited there. For how long, it was impossible to know. I sat without speaking, with my back against the farthest wall. She also sat, with precise, controlled movements. Her light braids contrasted with the blue of her skin, falling over her fur clothing. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was mandatory, as if words could break something delicate that was forming. I ate something from my backpack. Energy bars, dried fruits. She simply watched me. I offered her food, extending my hand. She didn't move. When I fell asleep, overcome by physical and emotional exhaustion, she didn't move. Days passed without words, or perhaps weeks. Time was difficult to measure there, where light barely changed. Each morning, I skied in circles around the crack. I explored the territory, marking mental reference points. I recorded some images with a camera I had brought almost by inertia. I collected temperature data, atmospheric pressure readings. Something of professional routine persisted in me, the geologist I had been before my life collapsed. But I also sought to understand. That creature wasn't part of the landscape. She was its center. She also went out. She didn't hunt, didn't eat, didn't drink. She simply walked for hours on the ice, leaving footprints that, strangely, closed after her passage. Sometimes she appeared in places where I hadn't seen a possible path, as if she knew secret passages beneath the surface, or as if she could traverse the ice itself. One night, I dreamed of ice columns, tall, perfect, aligned like a crystalline forest. Inside, bodies of men from different eras, some with ancient clothes, others modern, frozen, suspended in gestures of pain, surprise, supplication. Some seemed to sleep, others fought against an invisible enemy. At the center of all, her, with open eyes, full of calm, of infinite patience. I woke up sweating, despite the cold. She was in front of me, sitting, watching me breathe. Her eyes seemed to absorb the little light in the cavern. On one of my outings, I found a wider crack, about 500 meters from our shared refuge. I descended carefully, using ropes I had brought. The ice here was clearer, more transparent. It allowed seeing depths that were dizzying. I descended until I discovered a sealed chamber. The ice had formed in layers, like the rings of a tree. Inside, walls with engraved symbols. Ancient murals, some faded by time. A pattern repeated. A female figure in the center, surrounded by men. Always different, always alone. In a corner, a rough inscription, half buried in ice, in a language I shouldn't be able to understand, but somehow comprehended. The cycle only breaks if she loves. I spent hours studying the images. There was something ritual in them, something ceremonial. The female figure always had the same patterns on her skin as she did. The men were always arranged in a circle, looking toward her. In some murals, they seemed to plead. In others, to worship. In the most disturbing ones, they seemed to melt, while she remained intact. I returned to the cavern in silence, with more questions than answers. That night, she didn't wait for me in her usual corner. She stood by the mineral fire. Her skin seemed brighter, more alive. She looked at me for an instant, as if she knew exactly where I had been. Then she lowered her gaze, an almost human gesture, almost vulnerable. I didn't try to talk to her. I didn't know if she could understand me. I didn't try to touch her. Something told me it wasn't wise, but I stayed. What else did I have? Days passed without measure. She seemed more present, but also more distant, as if she were divided between two realities. Some gestures changed subtly. She sat closer, sometimes barely an arm's distance away. She stayed watching the mineral fire while I slept, as if seeking answers in the motionless flames. Sometimes, she followed me on my daily rounds, stepping right in my footprints. She didn't let me see her approach, but she didn't move away when I noticed her presence either. I didn't feel threatened, nor safe. It was like living next to a sleeping force, a contained storm. Something that could awaken at any moment. One morning, upon waking, I saw that she had left beside me a frozen shell, dark blue, with perfect edges and a mother-of-pearl interior that changed color according to the light. I didn't understand its meaning, but I didn't throw it away. I kept it in my pocket, along with my father's compass. The north had changed. One night, the cavern trembled. A small but unmistakable movement, like a heart beating underground. She sat up abruptly, with a fluidity no human could imitate. Her fur clothing stirred. She approached the back wall, the one she never touched, and pressed her open palm against the ice. The contact point glowed faintly. I watched her, motionless in my bed. She remained static, breathing deeply for the first time since I knew her. Her chest expanded and contracted in a slow rhythm, as if she were listening to something beneath the ice. A message. A warning. The next day, the outside ice had cracks that weren't there before. Thin, almost imperceptible. But they extended like a network, like veins beneath the Earth's skin. I understood now, or thought I understood. The cycle was approaching its end. For better or worse, something was changing, something was awakening. One day later, she didn't go out. Neither did I. We spent the entire day in the cavern, sitting, without crossing glances directly, without approaching each other. The air was denser, almost tangible. The temperature dropped despite the mineral fire. The shell in my pocket vibrated slightly, as if responding to a frequency I couldn't perceive. At nightfall, she stood up and walked toward me, not with her usual grace, but more heavily. Her movements seemed to cost her more effort. She sat beside me, so close I could feel the strange energy emanating from her. She rested her head on my shoulder, a gesture so human it was disconcerting. The contact wasn't warm, nor cold. It was different, like touching a living memory, as if her skin contained centuries of stories that wanted to be told. She said nothing. Neither did I. Words remained useless, unnecessary. So we spent the night, without sleeping, without moving, just feeling the pulse of something greater than ourselves. The next day, I woke up with my body numb. She was no longer there. I searched for her in the cavern, but there was no trace of her presence. I went out to look for her. The outside air was colder than ever. It cut like knives. I walked for more than an hour until I saw her, standing on a block of transparent ice that emerged from the ground like a natural pedestal. Inside, a man, frozen, young, with clothing from decades ago, eyes open, expression of surprise or ecstasy. It was difficult to distinguish. She looked at him, with something resembling sadness or remorse. I approached, slowly, with fear, with respect. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge my presence. She was absorbed in her contemplation. I looked around, and then I saw them. There were many more, dozens, perhaps hundreds. Blocks of crystalline ice emerging from the ground like an impossible harvest. Each one with a man inside, different ages, different eras. Some with ancient, unrecognizable clothing, others modern. All perfectly preserved. All looking toward the center, where she stood. They surrounded the place like a crystal prison, or a sanctuary. I understood then. All of them had been there before. All had arrived, like me, searching for something. All had failed. And now it was my turn. I was next. The last, perhaps. I returned to the cavern alone. That night I didn't sleep. I held the shell in my hands, feeling its vibration more intense now. At dawn, she returned. She had paler skin. The blue patterns seemed to be fading in some places. Her blonde braids fell heavily over her fur clothing. She sat in front of me. And this time she spoke. Her voice wasn't a sound. It was a thought that crossed space without noise, direct to my mind. I am not made to love. I am made to endure. I didn't respond. Not verbally. I approached. I put my hand over hers. Not as a romantic gesture. Not as conquest. As an affirmation of presence. Of mutual recognition. She didn't withdraw it. Her eyes fixed on mine. For the first time I saw something in them. A reflection. A flash. Something that wasn't there before. The cavern began to melt from within. The stalactites liquefied, dripping more rapidly. The temperature rose. The mineral fire pulsed with greater force, emitting reddish flashes. The storm outside was total. We could hear it howling like a wounded beast. The end had arrived. The cycle was completing. She stood up. She extended her hand to me. I took it. Together we went out to the surface. The wind was unbearable. The snow fell horizontally. But she moved with confidence, as if she knew every inch of this white hell. We both descended to the ice chamber. The frozen men seemed to watch, to judge. The liquid mirror in the center of the circle, a perfect pool where there had never been water before, gleamed like never before. She turned around. She approached me. Her eyes had no fear, no doubts, only waiting. A waiting that had lasted longer than I could comprehend. I kissed her. It wasn't a long kiss. It wasn't passionate. It was firm, sincere, silent. The world cracked. The frozen bodies began to vibrate, to illuminate from within. The columns cracked, sending ice fragments in all directions. The mirror exploded in a white mist that rose spiraling toward the sky, breaking the ice ceiling. The wind stopped. Suddenly, as if someone had flipped a switch. The light changed. Suddenly there was sun, resplendent, blinding. She knelt, gasping, suffering. Her skin transformed slowly, not like a snake shedding, like a metamorphosis. She wasn't dying, she was transforming. The blue marks on her skin paled, melting with a more human tone beneath. Her eyes changed, became defined, became more human, clearer. Her blonde hair lost that strangely perfect quality, becoming more natural, more real. She looked at me, with an intensity that burned. And in that instant, a tear ran down her cheek. First, only, impossible, real love. The men awakened, one by one. The ice that contained them melted as if it had never been so solid. They fell, confused, disoriented. They breathed air for the first time in years, decades, centuries. Some screamed, others laughed incredulously. Some cried, overwhelmed by the experience. They embraced without understanding, united by something they couldn't explain. The ice was collapsing. She could no longer stay on her feet. I held her tightly. Her eyes searched for mine. And then, in the midst of chaos, she said in a weak voice, "Now yes, we are free." I embraced her without thinking. The sunlight filtered for the first time through the cracks in the ice, and something in her body changed. It filled with color, with warmth, with life. We looked at each other. We smiled. And together, without looking back, we started to run. The ice disappeared beneath our steps, but it no longer mattered, because the world was waiting for us. And this time, we were going to discover it together.